Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Ben Wasylyshen and I'm with Dr. Stella Hryniuk. We're here at Oseredok's wonderful second floor gallery, and we're celebrating 150th anniversary of Manitoba, Manitoba 150. Finally, this exhibit, with all the obstacles before us in the last year and a half, is here in its entirety. It's a large show about Manitoba's history, a part of Manitoba's history, involving Ukrainian-Canadian settlement and development here in Manitoba. So we're very excited to have come together, Dr. Hryniuk as a historian, myself as an artist, researcher, curator, to look at what's in the collection, to search out Manitobans who would share their stories. Around the world, there are people untethered, looking for a place to live. Over the last 130 years, people of Ukrainian descent have come here and continue to do so to settle in our great province. And this is a part of the story. The archives, the people, the interviews, culminating and using and celebrating all kinds of talented individuals who came together to contribute to this big history. Now, I'm going to hand over the mic to my colleague. Formerly, we're both of the University of Manitoba, and I'm delighted Dr. Stella is here to add layers and layers of information that she is an expert on, that were uncovered with this big research project. You're going to find layers and layers and themes of all kinds here that are about people and the arts, and a little bit about politics, lots about cultural and geography, and she will share more of that with you. And this is my friend and colleague, Dr. Stella.
Yeah, Ben's right. I had interest in this field of history of the Ukrainians in Manitoba and Canada. So it's my pleasure to share the historical narrative. So you're going to see, as we go through the artifacts and the images, many prominent, but also mostly very ordinary people doing ordinary things. The prominent people who are the stars of our community will also shine in this show. So we're hoping that you'll see Manitoba Ukrainians over something like a period of 130 years, with a focus on the second and third and fourth waves of Ukrainians coming into Manitoba. So we could start with the idea of settlement of the second wave. With the very first section we have here is demonstrating something of the last perhaps decade of the first wave of immigration. We have images of people arriving, of people's settlements, and there are some very interesting images that Ben was able to draw from the archives of Oseredok. Do you want to say something about that?
The images that you see here are, by and large, restored photographic images. Images of the 15 people we interviewed to celebrate the 150 are new, spectacular photos by Dave Spizecki, a popular Manitoba photographer. But the restored images are a result of a team who restore tiny photographic images that are in disrepair, but they're vintage images. Some of them are 100 years old or more or less. And we go through a process of taking a 2-inch image, scan, prepare, and display an image that's very readable. What was exciting, of the many things that were exciting about assembling this project is that we had an opportunity to show bits and pieces of Manitoba. This is a very large gallery, but we would need, for this collection, probably a gallery 5 times the size to really put it out there. But this is a wonderful start for us to investigate images about Manitoba that other photographers and researchers have left here for 100-odd years. For instance, Gillam, Manitoba. This is about Manitoba, and you're going to see images from Europe and different parts of the world where people had reference points, and then they came here, and in this collection, people left images of different parts of Manitoba that they either lived in or explored, and now, with this celebration, we can show these images. It's not just about Winnipeg. It's about rural areas, north, south, and east and west.
Right, so we have a group of men disembarking, that's not the right word, but coming out off the train into Winnipeg. And this lower set of photographs is about some immigrant men arriving in Gillam. Now, Gillam is one of the northern outposts of Manitoba, and if you'll notice how barren it is, but it's got a brand new train station. These photographs came from the Boberski collection. Boberski was one of the representatives of the Ukrainian National Republic in Canada between 1919 and 1930, who had a camera, took pictures of these amazing happenings, and this is one of them.
So, with that, we move on to other parts of Manitoba, such as Tolstoy, Vida, downtown Winnipeg. And these are all fabulous images that show us what was going on in Manitoba at the time. And they describe the history. All very exciting. You'll see throughout the exhibit, there's an emphasis on people, ordinary people, special people. They're all special, doing special and extraordinary things. And we hope people will spend time here to discover all of that. You will see the great prairie fields and sky. You will see bits of architecture from different parts of the province, and we celebrate all that.
Yes, the photographs in this section really depict the size of the immigration. You can see in this one gathering in Vida, Manitoba, about probably 500 people out on a field with some clergy celebrating. It's a Congress of Ukrainians in 1937. You wouldn't find this ordinarily. This is an archival photograph, as is this one of Tolstoy, people around a church. You see children, adults dressed in their finest Sunday clothing. So it depicts life as it was in the 20s and 30s. Yeah. We're going to spend a little more time on that shortly.
So, when we look at some of our wonderful Manitobans, we chose to interview Mr. Dene, who is familiar to most people with his fabulous work in presenting theater made in Manitoba, about Manitoba, the General Strike of 1919. And then that musical became a movie. It's being shown now in different parts of Canada and the US. We talked to him about his life, about his rural life in Ethelbert. We combined images from the collection that suggested land, quarter section development of land. We looked at strike, we looked at parades that were described in our collection that are a part of Manitoba history. So with that, we have uncovered a whole another theme about Manitoba because of his wonderful work.
I would just like to add that the prairie imagery that has been added by these various pieces of art relates a lot to Dane's life and to the life of most Manitoban Ukrainians. They all started, 95% started on the land, and the next generations then became the artists and the professionals that we started to see in the 30s. And I think it's important to say that in this collection you see examples of people doing what perhaps has never been thought to be there, that they would be ready for, something they've been not prepared for yet. For example, when we get to see the building of the church in this town, we see the record of the treasurer of a school board. We're looking at the stages of development from the land, the first immigrants being the farmers, the agriculturalists, the next generation being the beginning with their knowledge of the language and of the country, contributing to Canada in their own ways. Dene is one of those who spent a good deal of his artistic life developing his theme.
So, themes. He had a theme. Artists like Don Proch has had themes. One of his spectacular grain elevators, a part of the Oseredok collection, has a feeling of what Manitoba is all about. And when we combine these architectural grain elevator with a church in Portage-la Prairie, another church in Shoal Lake, Manitoba, the Martyr Shrine on Jefferson Avenue, and the existing church of Disraeli on Disraeli Freeway with the first early schools, all in Manitoba. These interesting architectural images start to describe development, work, and progress as these new community structures were built because they were needed for different communities throughout in Manitoba, especially here we're describing people of Ukrainian descent. They needed these buildings. We celebrate the past and the present and celebrate all the production that took place in between. So here, Stella can comment on some early education in the city of Winnipeg and the rural areas that is indeed very interesting.
Well, everybody who's gone to a one-room school will relate to some of the photographs here. The first school that was built in Manitoba was thought to be in 1898 in Gimli area. This school, the Shevchenko School, was built in Vida area around 1918. Those are rural one-room schools, which then grew to be larger. But we have highlighted here the St. Nicholas School in Winnipeg, which was the first urban private school, not residential, a school for I think it was just up to middle school, that was established by the Catholic Church and operated by the Sister Servants of Mary Immaculate. The building is gone, but the school continues. So these are historic photos of St. Nicholas School. And really nearby is, it was the building that you see in the photo of the parish hall, the parish of St. Vladimir and Olga on, I believe it was, McGregor Avenue. You see the structure is urban Winnipeg. The interiors of the schools that we do have are depicting the Ukrainian character of the school. The background of the walls of this St. Nicholas School show the heroes. There's Bishop Budka, Yvonne Franco, there's a stage. That picture just speaks to so many aspects of Ukrainian Manitoba life.
So our journey continues with an investigation of the arts, which for 130 years has always been a part of Ukrainian settlement here in Manitoba. These lovely ladies who grace us, have graced our community for years, almost 90, 97, look at them. They lead us to discover and learn about archival concerts. One lady has been, you'll have to come and meet her here in the exhibit, has been on countless choir tours around the world. And another lady here was one of the original students of ballet master, dance master, who came from Ukraine to the United States and Canada and spent tremendous time in Manitoba, including making a movie.
Vasily
Avramenko, who, these are vintage, unique and rare photographs, not restored, that describe an era of development of folk ballet, Ukrainian dance, in this new land. So there are there is archives of 1946 that complement this whole story about hundreds of people who gathered to learn about dance, music, costuming, concerts. And that leads us to this poster that Stella will show from this side. A reference of a vintage, actual vintage poster that someone brought from Germany. That was a part of Ukrainian cultural heritage in Europe. It was translated and it still thrives here in Manitoba. But this is important because it leads us to a gentleman who came here from Belgium, who still is a big part of our community. You have to come to the show to meet him. But it tells a whole other story about people from other parts of the world who came to Manitoba. And Stella will tell you a bit about that.
The poster that we have here is of a concert in Munich. And you might ask why would this be here in this exhibit, which is about Ukrainians in Manitoba. In fact, this depicts what was a very significant part of the cultural life of people who came after the Second World War. Ukrainians who were displaced persons lived in German displaced persons camps for a number of years after the war until they were able to emigrate to other lands like Canada. So this shows that there was a cultural life in those camps that was quite vibrant, and that it showed too that this was a place where they could, where the Ukrainians could celebrate their culture without any difficulty of repression by the Soviets from places where they come, from the Soviet Ukraine. Many of the images that you see around this theme of the third wave, the displaced persons, let you know that these were young people with babies and children coming, sometimes newlywed, as Mr. Selinsky, Donna Selinsky's father was. They come into Manitoba. Some of these images are of their time in Europe. Then we pass right into the story of Bogdan, the younger, the son, the baby born in Belgium, who comes here, who becomes active in the Ukrainian community. So we have an image here of Dawn in an orchestra playing a violin, and his violin master is another prominent Ukrainian musical family, Stella Koma Peters.
Who still is with us, lives in North Kildon, is still associated with the community, And here's something that many people may not have known. And we assembled these jewels of information to tell different stories about different Manitobans. I mean, this is the story to be born in Belgium, to, Stella, do you want to slide back here? To be born in Belgium while parents are finding their place in Germany, move quickly to Barcelona, get on this ship, and come to Eastern Canada, and then get on the train and come to Winnipeg, Manitoba, and developed a big life here. So these are very interesting stories. In this part of the gallery, before Dr. Stella and I move into this vignette with some wonderful people who have graced our history, we look back in the collection to some of the items that came from Europe that also grace our history. This exquisite blouse of homespun linen, homespun wool thread in exquisite embroidery from the Borshchiv area of Western Ukraine, near existing Ternopil, shows us about the beauty of the arts, the culture, and the crafting that went into costuming and festive dress of the time. This is a part of the museum collection, and we now see dance groups and vocalists and so forth wear these types of blouses and so forth. But we pulled one exquisite piece from our collection here at Oseredok as a reference to where people came from. So now next to Stella's celebrating the Dauphin Ukrainian Festival, so we went to that part from Grand Beach, Winnipeg Beach, Birds Hill. We went to Dauphin to celebrate festivals, and our former mayor of Ukrainian descent, who was a big champion of the city of Winnipeg and the province, brought festivals, sporting events, and the such to Winnipeg. And Stella can tell us a little bit more about Mr. Mayor Stephen Chuba, and also about the famed violinist of that time in the 1950s, Donna Gresso.
Stephen Chuba is a well-known name to Winnipeggers. There's a park named after him. He was a mayor for 20 years. So we have this very lovely portrait of him from the collection, probably in the later years of his reign. He was important in so many ways, but he brought the ideas of cultural adaptation and multiculturalism probably earlier than it actually came as a policy to Winnipeg, and so that we had the development of something like the Folk Arts Council and then the Folklorama, which grew out of that. The portrait photograph of Donna Gresso is she was a young child prodigy violinist who was kind of encouraged to move very quickly into the art world. She performed in stages all over the world, but particularly in the United States, in Carnegie Hall. She was born and raised here. There's a depiction, there's a photo of her, the interior of the Civic Auditorium in which she performed, and at which one of our earlier, the photo of Stella Hryniuk will tell you that she was her instructor and was present at that concert as well. These are vintage photos of Gresso and Chuba that you need to see to believe that they are such good pictures.
Now, in this presentation, you're going to find all kinds of wonderful, varied images that create a party-like atmosphere, because this exhibition is a celebration of Manitoba. It includes beautiful abstract paintings, 110 years apart from creative costuming, decorative costuming. For instance, this painting by Stan Stech, which is a part of the Oseredok collection, and there are many other paintings here that create a feeling about the community and give the occasion a sense of celebration. So when you come here, there'll be something for everyone to enjoy. If a boxing match in 1926 is not the most exciting thing for you, maybe a contemporary abstract painting is, and we go from there. So we move into this area, which starts to develop the idea of arts and dreams in Manitoba within this big celebration, this big birthday celebration. And arts and dreams are a part of the lives of the people who have been here for so long, the ideas they brought from other parts of the world and their traditions, and then develop it here in Manitoba. So we have had singers, choreographers, dancers. On this occasion, we have found a wonderful connection about our star dancer with the Royal Winnipeg Ballet, Dmitry Dovhosalets. He came here as a new Manitoban. There's a story about his work coming from Europe to Edmonton, then to Winnipeg, and gracing our stages and performances on behalf of the people of Manitoba with the Royal Winnipeg Ballet, in turn educating many dance groups here in the province, Winnipeg and outside of Winnipeg, which shows you artistic development at a very high level. So we celebrate him and his talents. In this case, the Rozmaï Ensemble here of Winnipeg, which he has been the artistic director. And there's a whole story here that we don't have time to discuss at this video. But we invite you to come and study it along with vintage books from our library about the tradition of ballet and Ukrainian folk dance, and a reference to, again, Vasily Avraменko, ballet master, back to the era here as far as the 30s, combined with activities that are very current. And maybe you can meet Her Majesty, the Queen, in photo, as well as a part of that Manitoba celebration a few years back and this current one.
There's a great deal to know about the arts and development of Ukrainian art and talent in Manitoba. I think what you will see is a kind of a trend that develops very quickly in Ukrainian-Canadian Manitoba life, where the artists feel, you see it in the photographs, they feel very welcomed, they perform, of course, splendidly, and audiences in the cities in particular are very welcoming. I would suggest that you look at different parts of this exhibit after you've gone through once. Go and compare, for example, what we have on Avraменko in one part of the exhibit with what we see here, to see how that development has occurred, how the beauty of Ukrainian art and music has been maintained and grown in the province, in Manitoba over time.
So when we just gently turn our attention this way, you will notice in this exhibition there are people of varying ages, from 7 years old to 97. That's Manitoba. We were able to contact these wonderful people, and they shared graciously their stories. And one is a young new immigrant here, and he has a story to tell. So we invite you to come and meet these young people, because they are a part of the whole cultural mix and a part of the history of Manitoba. Earlier on, I said that people historically have been looking for a place to live. They still are. And one of the themes here is the theme of immigration, which has been integral to knowing and learning about Manitoba and its 150 years. So, as we continue to celebrate Manitoba 150, and we look at the reference to this community in Manitoba, we look at, for this theme, faith and hope, church and school, faith and education. These were keys to better lives for Ukrainians in Manitoba, and so many other Manitobans as well. And people were allowed to celebrate their individual faiths, and that's what we do here. We look at architecture and building and community building and the ability to create better lives here in Manitoba and Canada. So we have reference to Winnipeg, North Main Street, the National Cathedral of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, a church in Oakburn, Manitoba. Another view of the cathedral on Main, Manitoba landmark, a designated heritage site, and its role that it played in the celebration of the Pan American Games.
In 1999.
So, 1999. Wow, how exciting. But that's Manitoba. So, I'll let Stella comment on faith and hope further, because it was and still remains to be so significant in our province.
Ukrainians came from Ukraine with deep faith and hope in their future, of course. So Manitoba has probably still standing something like 200 churches built by Ukrainians. The one that we're featuring here, the two, are prominent in that they were built in stages. So you'll see that there's a basement and then there's a section, often because parishioners couldn't afford to build the whole structure all in one shot. And then you see the beautification of the church as it is completed and beyond its completion, so that it attracts. It's an attractive piece of Winnipeg architecture, as well as a place of faith and worship. The smaller churches in the countryside, of which there are still hundreds, themselves have a kind of beauty which is copying somewhat the urban churches, but it also has its own place in the countryside. The cupolas, the crosses soaring in the sky are just iconic images of Manitoba.
We're moving further through the gallery and this celebration to look at an individual opera singer, Lara Jakevich, who came from the Cooks Creek, Springfield area. We know Cooks Creek for the grotto. She was nurtured in the church community and cultural community, and now sings on opera hall stages. So we made reference to other opera singers and significant concerts that have been a part of the Winnipeg and Manitoba scene, vintage classical music publications that come from our collection are complemented with references to the noted Old Koshet's choir that has gone on to tour many countries around the world and have done embassarial work on behalf of the people of Manitoba. Also in the theme of the vocal arts is sculpture, as we see here, Winnipeg educator, sculptor Jeanne Bachinski, who is still active and practicing her art in stone and concrete. And she is a part of the community and continues to produce beautiful work that graces our lives. So here, arts and dreams have continued. They came from another place, they were nurtured and flourished here, and they continue to do so. With festivals, with individual productive artists, concerts, and exhibitions, our lives are made better because of the arts. We can be down from time to time and experience bad luck, hard times. Through what we are sharing with you here, in the arts, they have the power to lift us out of our sometimes troubled lives, our ordinary days, and lift us to a place where we can celebrate. So that's what we do here today with this exhibition about Manitoba 150, is we celebrate.
And we are grateful that as a community of immigrants over 130 years, we have developed and added to the culture of Manitoba significantly. The depictions here of the Alexander Koshet's choir singing in a concert of the Winnipeg Symphony Orchestra in their new music festival lets you know that they are actively involved in the development, continuing of music and the symphonic work of Winnipeg. There's a picture here of a mass choir in which the Koshet's choir was involved doing the Messiah in the former Winnipeg Arena, which took place in the 80s. These photographs will astound you when you think of how little we've been able to do that kind of meeting in large groups and at concerts. And especially to remember or to remind us of groups like the Koshet's Choir, who have been in existence since the 1940s and are still performing as soon as they can again in Winnipeg and across the world.
This, as we turn the corner in the exhibition to continue the celebration, we go from the Leo Moe Sculpture Garden here at Assiniboine Park and look at that sculptor's wonderful career and contribution to Manitoba. Then we can take a shift to look back on the life of Mike Swistoon from Olha, Manitoba. That's near the Parkland region towards Dauphin and so forth. That area where we have a chance to look at a National Film Board documentary about a man who was a dreamer. He had hopes and dreams as a Manitoban and was at one point considered the strongest man in the world, and you come and read the story about him. And he also built churches. He had a strong connection to faith and left us with many fine buildings that stand today. There's a story, and it even depicts him here at the age of 74, where he's still bending steel as if he was in the Barnum and Bailey circus still. So and there's a connection with him not only to architecture but to music, because he was a violinist. We look at, because of his story, at different parts of Manitoba: Seach, Manitoba, Selkirk, Manitoba. We move to Enola, and there are different connections because of the community and individuals who spent time there, built something, celebrated something, and they were interesting Manitobans. This Manitoba Fishing Lodge diorama is a part of the collection of Professor Havaleshka that he commissioned an artist to create a vignette about rural Manitoba, about train stops and what lodges looked like and what the feeling of rural Manitoba was. So we're fortunate to be able to take that and combine it with other rural areas as a part of storytelling of people who explored Manitoba. Stella?
The idea of being rural and remote is something that is hard to show in an exhibit like this. But this diorama will give you a sense of perhaps the sort of remoteness in a village in the area where there's sloughs and rivers and fairly not that many people. Bush pilots, there's a booklet here, a book about bush pilots, also tells you the story of living, Ukrainians living in the north, in Gillam, in the Paw. We haven't got a picture of Gillam. Oh yes, we have Gillam,
Yes,
but we
Gillam.
don't have the Paw. So we're trying to show the extent of the extent of settlement of Ukrainians in Manitoba, from east to west and north to south.
So we're continuing our tour. We showed you parts of rural Manitoba and discussed a bit of the arts. There's more that you can come and discover on theater here in Manitoba. We're connecting you now to the present. Continuing immigration. We talked about an immigration theme earlier. This is continuing immigration, where this young individual studying at the University of Manitoba, engineering, with an interest in aerospace. So we have a feature on aerospace that's connecting Manitoba to Ukraine and the development of. This is a part of her generation and her world, where in 2004, in Kiev, there was an Orange Revolution where people stood up for their freedoms and wanted to change their lives in that country, and it affected people around the world, including Manitoba. And here that president, who was elected at that time in the spirit of freedom and progression, came to the legislature to be with all these wonderful children from Manitoba and celebrate our lives here. Stella?
The present generation of Ukrainians coming to Canada are a different immigration from the others, as they all have been different in their own ways. I think what you're going to see is the beginning of a generation in Canada who are feeling the freedom of Canada, the absence of the oppression, the political and economic oppression of Ukraine. So we have people like Anastasia studying here. We have others coming here to teach and work, and we'll see more of those. The fact is that immigration never really stops Canada as a country of immigrants, and Ukrainian immigrants are coming and will continue to.
So when we make a shift from Anastasia to Yevgenia, another new, exciting Manitoban, she came with talents and interested in education. She's an educator with the Red River Community College system. She taught dance and fire dance in Europe, and she brought that to now the Morden area. And she shares those talents, including folklore, history, education of history and folklore, and different kinds of dance. And it's a new wave of new, exciting kinds of influences here in Manitoba. So look at how things have progressed and changed throughout this very long history. So we welcome her as a new person, new immigrant to Manitoba, and all of her energies and talents that she brings to share with all Manitobans in a very progressive way. So as we come to the conclusion of this rather short presentation of a very big, colorful history, we look back to how this project started with the government of Manitoba, Manitoba 150 and the Manitoba Arts Council, and other supporters of this cultural center, whereby it was about investigating the lives of 15 people who have come here from different parts of the world. Oral histories, personal thoughts. This project then evolved to investigate those stories, to learn about these people, fabulous people, established people, new people, and to see what was in the collection that could complement their lives and tell a story, a big story, only a partial story about Manitoba. So, in the end, for the people who have been here for 97 years, or people who have been here for 3 years, this is home. Like a wave, like the mighty waves on Lake Winnipeg, the Ukrainians who immigrated to Manitoba have built a shore, a landing, and a place where they call home. They have worked and contributed, and they continue to do so. We invite you all for the next couple months ahead, as this major exhibition is offered to the people of Manitoba and your families and your guests who come here. As we come out of this COVID period, a dark period, come here to Oseredok, out of that darkness, come to the light and the joy that we are sharing with all the people of Manitoba in celebrating Manitoba 150.